What's going on, guys? Get started here just shortly. Let everyone trickle in. What in the world? Not bad. Just a sec. Get started here, guys. But what's going on? What's going on? What a day. Powell gave us quite a little bit of a roller coaster, but interesting day nonetheless. What's going on, Chris? This dude with the gold Celtics. Are you serious? Wait, you're a Minnesota fan and you're a Celtics fan. That's interesting. AMD 110 by Friday. I'll take a look at it. I haven't looked at AMD. Since this morning, I know that I called out a pretty fire play on that. I think it was around $100 to $99. When I called it out, I said that it was going to about 103 roughly this morning, I think. When I dropped the chart also in ideas channel. So that was a beautiful one that played out, but I got to see what further upside. I know that Nvidia calls were literally just hitting the tape left and right. I think we all saw the amount of flow that was coming through, minor, major. It literally came left and right. It was up about $8 today. I think everyone that got in, maybe you kind of gotten a little bit too high, but I saw a lot of chatter about a few traders that pretty much they were not able to capitalize on the Nvidia trade. Hopefully, some of you actually got out even, but it is what it is. We'll see. I'll take a look at Nvidia and AMD both because semis actually had quite the day. Um, just from a standpoint, one was up $8, one was up $7. So definitely an interesting day. You're a winning team fan, so you're basically a bandwagon fan. Is that what it is, Chris? So if say by no after this series, what you're gonna jump to Luka Doncic? You're gonna be a Mavericks fan. Is that what you're gonna do? All right, whatever. Aside from that, what's going on, Randy? What's going on, Russell? Let's get started here. Kind of just give you a quick recap of what I was looking at, what I was expecting. I kind of did mention yesterday I was watching Spy. I gave you the upside. I gave you the potential downside. Obviously, that morning gap up kind of told you a little bit of what you need to know in terms of the upside target. And that immediate upside target I was watching was that 410 spot. We're about 2 points shy of that 410 spot, and that's what I am still looking at right now is that 410. And then obviously I'm gonna get into the levels above that, but 410 is a spot I can see us pretty much retracing. Maybe get a pullback to 406. Maybe those of you that are in puts, that'll be the spot that you want to watch to see if you roll over below that 406 tomorrow morning. But 406 is ideally the support level that I'm watching for, and I'm expecting the market to even go higher than this. And why is that in particular? Reason being is because Powell basically gave the market everything it wanted to know, right? It gave us the fact that inflation was high. It told us he was going to continue to raise rates, whether it be longer, it be higher, didn't matter. We know that it's going higher. It's already a known factor right now. He also pretty much mentioned that commodity prices, prices in general, were going to be pretty much continue to be impacted off of the Ukraine war. That was a big highlight of what the market wanted to hear, what it needed to hear, and the fact that obviously it's nothing new that we didn't know. Prices are already continuing to go higher. We know gas prices just continue to elevate. So that's something that the market, even though we already knew it, we wanted to hear Powell continue to say it. But the bigger factor was the sense that, you know, today Powell basically said that whatever was going to be necessary in terms of rate hike, everything was on the table. And that's actually what the market didn't get that kind of vibe. The last time that Powell said that there was only going to be basically a two back-to-back 50-point basis rate hikes. So now everything's on the table is basically what that tells the market. And that's why we saw the market pretty much just reacted positively because everything's already known now. So what's really left for the market to know basically about in terms of everything being already a crap show. Everything is already bad as it is, and now we know it's only going to get worse from here in terms of rate hikes and pretty much the inflation in terms of prices going up, commodities and everything. All right, so that's what I basically got out of that. So being the fact that there's nothing left for the market to really know about right now for the meantime, there's no caveat to whatever he said, anything in the near term. I think we have a little bit of a bear market rally that's probably on the horizon. on continuation of what we saw today. We had that beautiful dip and rip. The actual scenario that we had after his statements that came out was ideally what I remember seeing from FOMC a few days ago, a few weeks ago, if that be the case, right? We ended up having that nice little lower low, lower high kind of scenario off of the FOMC statements, similar to today. And then you had that nice springboard action that just took us straight vertical to the north. And that's exactly what ended up happening today. But getting into the levels of SPY that I was particularly watching, again, 410.5 is that spot that I'm watching. That is also the low that we put in from the week of February 24th. We're going to look to see if we end up retesting that 410.5. That'll be where I want to see. That's going to be a very pivotal level right now. That's going to tell me if we're going to end up going higher or not. If we go over that 410.5, then what I'm looking at is 416 to 416 high is what I'm watching for. So that's pretty much in terms of my upside right now that I'm looking at. Otherwise, if we fail to even hold this 406 support come tomorrow morning, which I'm assuming we're going to end up retesting tomorrow, then we can start to look back to retrace back down below the 400 mark, which is purely a mental number. And then you also have a key pivotal support here at 398. Below 398, then you're looking at 394 low is what you're watching for. All right. So those are pretty much just eyeballing the levels that the very key levels that I'm watching here, bigger perspective going in towards basically the rest of the week here. All right. But personally, I'm favoring the 416. I think we have a little bit more upside. The more telling story as well, not even just the daily, is also looking at the weekly, right? The weekly, we've already had 6 red weeks here in the market. If you actually see this is the weekly chart. 6 red weeks. Obviously, you see that we're trying to put in a nice bottom here, a nice reversal, and that's why I say that 410 spot is going to be a very big level, very big critical level to see if we can get over that March high, that February high, February low that we had of that 410 half. That's where I want to see if we can make it over that 410 half. But the fact that we had already 6 weeks, if we're able to close this week green, then I would expect that we don't just necessarily stop at 410. We're likely headed to that 416 spot, which has been about a little bit of a tweezer bottom. You saw we had a nice little tweezer bottom from the beginning of March here, and that also had a little bit of a confluence in terms of support to resistance between the months of April to June of last year. So that's pretty much just a confluence in what I'm looking at, the key levels that I'm watching. 416 is my upside, but 410 half is going to be very pivotal to get over. Otherwise, we break that 406 support that I'm looking to retest tomorrow morning, and then we're flirting with that 400 down back towards 398. All right. So it's pretty much as simple as that in both directions is what I'm looking at. All right. So not necessarily pretty much being biased about it, but I think right now the market's pretty much already has all the known factors that it wanted, and that's why we saw that reaction that we saw here today. Could I be entirely wrong? And that's why I gave you the downside action is that we've seen in the past where every time we get something from the feds, any kind of statement, news like this, is that it takes a night for the market to digest it. So let's see how the market pretty much reflects off of this overnight, and that'll likely be the telling story. All right. But other than that, just keeping. I don't really have anything too much on the watch list right now. Obviously, I'm gonna get to the semis real quick. I know that one that was pretty much, this is always a watch for everyone. I think a few are holding puts overnight on Tesla here, but you have a nice little wedge going on with Tesla right now. Let's see what she actually ends up doing. She's literally sitting right at the resistance, the downtrend resistance of this little wedge that's going on. I want to see if she's going to end up making a convincing move up towards 785, or do we end up breaking the trend line support here? And then that means that we come down towards 720, 719. Key thing to know is that 719 is a very heavy support level, major support level on Tesla. If we end up cracking that 719, in which, obviously that would incline that market's gonna just dump here going into tomorrow, is that if we end up breaking 719, I see this well below 700. So that's just something to keep in mind. Just knowing the fact that 719 is a very mental and critical major level on Tesla here. So that's something to note. But obviously, you want to draw this wedge on your chart. Look to see which way it breaks. Likely the morning gap up or gap down will be a telling story. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up opening down at the trendline support at the 437 here. And then we likely get maybe a bounce into the open, and then we'll see what our directional move is at that point. So the wedge is closing in. I'm looking to see which way this wedge is going to end up breaking, north or south. I'm just kind of hoping that it doesn't happen before the market open because I did not hold a position on Tesla. I pretty much reserved the fact that I wanted to stay cash. I wanted to sleep overnight. So we'll see how the market digests is really what I'm waiting for. Even though I'm assuming that we're going bullish here. We're going to continue the upside. I want to see how the market's going to digest this before I really step in. And especially overnight positions have been just a slaughter. If you would have imagine you swung puts overnight, we literally gapped up 6 points on SPY, literally just insanely crazy. So you definitely have to pick your spots when you're swinging here overnight. That's something that you definitely have to do. How about puts on Facebook? I was actually looking for the algo to go off today, the cloud alert to go off on Facebook. I was actually hoping that was gonna happen, but the cloud alert yesterday on Facebook that went off yesterday, that was just literally money. But I haven't looked at too much going into the close. Again, I kind of want to digest the fact of what the market's reaction is gonna be come tomorrow. But I'll take a look at that real quick. Let me see what Facebook's really doing here. And I'm sure everyone's kind of making the case for an inverted head and shoulders here. You have a little bit of a left shoulder, you have the head, and then you have that right shoulder. One thing is that you pretty much made 3/4 of the way of this gap fill. That's something that's pretty much to be noted off of the daily here. If I kind of zoom in, let's see if we have any kind of formation going on. Um, I would make the case for a little bit of an ascending triangle action going on here. That's pretty much what I would say. Is you have a nice little bit of an ascending triangle action going on, in which case this is another one you're going to want to see which direction this is going to end up breaking here. So I would say this is an ascending triangle here on Facebook. Pretty much you want to see how that's going to end up playing out. But so if you end up breaking here, you break north of 205 half, then we could see this go for the gap fill here up at this 220 mark. That's likely going to be what's the tape is going to end up hitting left and right. If once you break that 206 ballpark number, 206 breaks, you're likely going to see the tape just be flooded with the 220 calls. Um, Preferably, my no conservative price target here will be right around the 210 mark if you can crack 206, in which that's about a $4 upside. Otherwise, you're looking at breaking this trend line support. You get a move here, you break that trend line, and you break back under 199 half. Then I'm looking at this back down towards this 191 low is what I'm watching for. So that's pretty much what you're waiting for. This is another one kind of waiting for a breakout, kind of similar to how Tesla is in a wedge. Well, you have Facebook in an ascending triangle. So wait for the direction move, and that's why I'm kind of glad I see a lot of names that were just pretty much just in a certain position, which they're waiting for a directional break, even though we had just a beautiful push to the north into the close. All right, so that's Facebook. The other one that someone did mention was AMD. Let's take a peep. I haven't even touched this chart since this morning when I posted it in ideas. It pretty much looks identical. But I had this wedge pretty much formed out. Why does it look so different on the 2 hour? Okay, I think I had the wedge pretty much plotted out. Let's see what time frame it was. Was it maybe the hourly? Okay, yeah, it was the hourly. So I ended up having this chart on the hourly. If you guys remember, I dropped it in ideas. It was right around where the bottom of this white arrow was. So we were sitting right around 99 half is where I had this when I dropped this chart into ideas. Now we ended up pretty much topping out at this 103 low. So where do we go from here basically now, right? We already filled the gap that we had down below. This gap was already filled here at this 100, what is this? 100.67 was where the gap ended up filling. But now we end up having another gap. So this is pretty much a good insight. You touched into that gap fill, but you haven't completed it yet, just yet. So what do I want to see here? I want to see you pretty much reclaim 103 here. You reclaim 103, then I'm watching for this to take out that gap to 103.56. And above that, then my moderate conservative target here will be 105 is your next PT. 105.30 would be my next PT. Above that, then I have this being pretty much a slingshot towards 107. The 110 that you kind of mentioned feels a little bit like a stretch. I would really need to see semis really push that hard. But if I had to be more conservative for you, Kevin, I really think that it's going to be 107 is likely going to be your top end target. Here's what I'm watching for AMD. All right. So that's still roughly, we already had an $8 move today. You're potentially looking at still about another $5 move to the upside here. Granted the fact that if this continues to push. All right. So that's particularly just the upside. Obviously, if you pretty much end up breaking down, if we end up breaking that back down below this 100 half, then we're starting to look at the gap fill and below, in which market volatility is likely going to kick back in as it was fading into the close here today, and that's going to end up likely taking this back down below that 100 half. Then we're watching the gap fill at 97, and we can stretch this back down towards 95, in which we pretty much give up all of today's price action. All right, so that's the flip side of both ways. All right, but I like this one to 107. Obviously, I'm kind of favoring the upside here just a bit, but 107 would be my ideal target. This may end up being a day trade if the market conditions present itself. I think 107 is in the picture here, and that might be a beautiful day trade tomorrow. The other one that pretty much coincides was Nvidia. This is another one. I know we had that gap fill, which it looks a little bit more different, I think, on the 15 minute, which is probably where I had it charted. Yeah, it was pretty much on the 15 minutes. So we didn't quite fill the gap fill here just yet. This is one I saw the flow just coming through left and right. It was just insane to watch that flow. But unfortunately, we didn't get the move that we particularly wanted. So we'll look to see if we can pretty much get a move. I want to see this pretty much get a move back over 183. 183 would be that spot. My only concern here, and this is where it's going to get dicey, is that I smell a gap up coming here because just of the fact of how close you are to this gap. This gap is literally only what $3 away. We've seen Nvidia gap up $6 overnight. So this one would not surprise me if we end up seeing Nvidia gap up here and it actually completes the entire gap fill. So it's kind of close to say where you want to see this really get over. But 184 looks to be another little pivotal level that you want to watch. So 184 would be that, kind of that imbalance here, whether it continues to sustain a push over the 184 above the gap fill, or if it ends up dropping off below the 184, maybe you get a gap up and it drops off below 184, then that might end up being a signal for a short. So that's something to just keep in mind. 184 might end up being that line in the sand in terms of whether this maintains that bullish sentiment or it goes back to being bearish. All right. But I'm just kind of a little more frightened about a gap fill on this one in particular, that you may not end up being able to play the gap fill here. All right. But other than that, if we get a move above the gap fill here, the next major level that I'm watching here is 188 half. Above the 188 half, then I see the stretching up towards 191. All right. So those would be pretty much the levels that I'm watching. Obviously, you see the risk to the downside. That's why I say watch the 184. Granted, the fact that if it crushes under 184, you're watching this to pretty much flush right back under this 177, and you have the completion of the gap fill in sight at that 173 half. All right. So that's how I would pretty much look at Nvidia here. But preferably, and I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier on in the morning here during live, I prefer AMD over Nvidia. Just me personally, and I think even if you look at Nvidia, it was up $9 today. How much was AMD up? It was up $8. So relatively, I mean, Nvidia's up what double the stock price of AMD, and they pretty much had equal uh, price movement today. So that's why I did favor AMD over Nvidia, and I know it's also cheaper premiums as well for AMD. All right. Let's see what else. Anyone have anything that they want to look at? Come on, Dio. You mentioned DUOL. Let's take a look. See what it is. I have not looked at this ticker. $81. Package software. All right. Let's see if we can find where's our downtrend resistance first. That's pretty much the most ideal thing that you want to look at. Here will be where I will be looking at my downtrend resistance. That will be what you're looking at. In terms of support and what I'm watching here, I actually, this smells a little bit awkward, but I actually look like this may end up being a descending broadening wedge. This might be one of those patterns that I actually do favor. Is with those descending broadening wedge actions, you end up once you end up finding the support. Obviously, it's a little funky because you had that volatility back in the middle of March, but that actually ended up bouncing once you ended up finding that downtrend support level off of that 60 mark. Obviously you see the upside that potential that you had. That's why I kind of mentioned it, I think maybe yesterday, that the descending broadening wedge patterns were starting to be my favorite right now. Is that once you're able to find that downtrend support level, you literally see how much of a distance that you have from the support up to the resistance. Right now, you're in a little bit of a peculiar spot, I want to say. Ideally, I would want to see this pretty much make a move here back over 86. 86.65 will be the spot I want to see this reclaim. in which case you're going to make that move back towards the downtrend resistance. But otherwise, if you're kind of trying to get in a little bit earlier and you get faked out in terms of reversal back to the upside, now you're risking this fat gap that you have to the downside. So me personally, I would wait for 86.65 to break Commandio. Once you get that break over 86.65, then I would feel a lot more comfortable in terms of uh, the move towards the resistance and then potentially breaking that downtrend resistance off of this broadening wedge. Otherwise, if you try to time that entry a little too early, then you're likely going to end up possibly risking the fact that you're going to get faked out to the upside, and then this gap fill back down is going to be pretty large. All right, and that's pretty much what I would mention to you about that one. All right, but I definitely like the pattern. This is definitely one. I mean, one of my favorite patterns right now in the market. I've definitely gone away from rising wedges. I don't think inverse head and shoulders have really been working in this type of market environment as well. So it's all about finding what works well for you. And this has definitely been one of those patterns that have worked well for me. So that's just pretty much a little bit of an insight. All right. Let me take a look at that, Shirag. You wanted me to look at Twilio? Let's take a peep at Twilio. E. Damn, what happened to this chart? This thing is just what in the world? Yeah, this is like another Shopify type of chart. Ew. All right, let's see if we can get down to a smaller time frame. Probably give us a better insight. I do see it's trying to curl, so I will give it that. I see it's trying to curl down at the bottom here. Let's see where if we already get a nice little downtrend resistance that we had. I feel like I want to change this color. All right, we'll put it green. So there you go. You see your downtrend resistance right now. You see that you made the breakout here back from May 13th. You see that you finally got the retest. I will say this is more so your ideal spot to enter on this right now. I do like the spot. You got the beautiful retest. You got a little bit of the consolidation right now bouncing off of that downtrend retest. And then you should be able to make the move. Now, if you really want to play this safe in terms of where you should ideally enter, I would wait for this to break over 103.70 would be the spot. You break over 103.70, then that would end up making you take that push towards this gap fill that you have above 108.74. All right. So that's how I would go about playing this. 103, uh, yeah, 103.70 will be your breakout point in terms of continuation to the upside, 103.70, and then that will set you in sight for the gap fill over 108.74. All right, and that's how I would go about playing this. All right, so that would roughly give you about from 10 from 103 here, and gap fills at 109. So you're looking about roughly about a $6 move to the upside here on Twilio. All right, if that ends up playing out that way. But that's why I say if it can't find momentum over that 103.70, then likely there's more downside on the back end of that downgrade that you just mentioned. In which case, this ends up fading off of the downtrend retest, and it goes right back into the downtrend. All right. So wait for the 103.70 break. If it breaks that, then you get your upside to the gap fill. Otherwise, if you end up fading under 99.5, then that's likely where you're going to get continuation to the downside on the back end of the downgrade. All right. So hopefully that kind of gave you the breakdown on that in terms of both ways. So obviously, the fact that the market is bullish, it's going to be hard pressed for this to pretty much stay down. Granted, the fact that you see it got a nice little move today, and pretty much tech has been up relatively today. You want to see what the broader market's going to do in respect to that as well. If the market continues to push, it's likely that that downgrade pretty much is going to be not even an impact on the stock just continuing to go up off of this downtrend break and retest. All right. But other than that, kind of the names I was watching, nothing else really stood out to me. I kind of want to see how the banks do. The banks didn't do so bad. The banks had a nice little inverted head and shoulders here. This is JPM. You had a nice little inverted head and shoulders action. I would particularly be looking at JPM here over 124. So that one's gonna catch my attention. I kind of wanted to see. I know banks have been very silent. I haven't seen any noise about banks. The tape has been very quiet on banks as well. I know that they've been kind of a fader in all of this right now. But JPM has just been a silent one on my radar for the past few days. We get this one over 124. I'm kind of watching this gap fill here over this 126, in which that's potentially about a $2.50 to $3 move potentially on JPM. And I know the premiums are relatively cheap on this one. I think kind of similar to AMD premiums, more so or less, right? But this is one that's kind of on my radar, a little low key, low radar type of name that I'm keeping an eye on. I did mention the Pfizer one. That's one that's still also on my radar. I'm going to continue to watch this one. You have, why does this look so much different here? All right, there you go. You have this nice little ascending channel action. I'm looking to see at what point this ends up. Um, possibly end up being a breakdown. Maybe you have this pretty much. I'm watching this to see if we end up getting a break back below 51 flat. This will likely be a spot where I look to see if we end up getting a breakdown and we take this back under 50 half and we end up breaking that trendline support. So this is one I'm watching. It's another one on my radar. Kind of just watching it right now, though, not really taking a step into it just yet. Monitoring that until the time is right. But other than that, I know that Apple's already made its move. I'm sure there's a lot of shorts looking to step in on Apple here. I think 150 was the big level that I saw a lot of the shorts pretty much coming in for. They literally went in the money on the 150 strike, and that's what I pretty much saw for most of the afternoon following Powell's news today. But I think there's a little bit more upside on this one. We may be able to stretch up towards 151, 151 half. Otherwise, if that stretches above 151 half, I'm watching this one. That level that I was particularly watching was 153.40. Was what I was watching for in continuation to the upside. So shorts may get no a little bit more pain, probably get a little bit squeezed on this one. But this is one that I know the shorts are also looking at. So I'm waiting on this one for a short position, but I'm not necessarily forcing it. I would rather just wait for that short position to pretty much be an opportunity in terms of risk reward. I would rather short it at 153, 154 than try to short it at 150 with everyone that's likely going to possibly end up getting squeezed. So I'll wait for it. We'll see what ends up happening on that one. But otherwise, if you get this back under 148 here, I think this likely ends up being particularly a pretty nice short and a continuation of gap fill that completes at 146 low. All right. So that's another one to keep on the radar. Apple's usually always on the radar along with Tesla. So those are two names that are pretty much always on watch. All right. But other than that, I think that's kind of short and sweet. The names I'm watching, some names that kind of are still on the radar per se. But again, I want to stay cash tonight for my own peace of mind. I want to see how the market's going to react, particularly to everything that Powell just said today. Uh, personally, I think everything he said was already a known factor, and that's why we saw the market just push right off of the back end of what he said. But now it's going to be on the, how's the market going to digest all of this? Are they going to think the fact that the Feds are not doing enough? Maybe we need to price in more of the continuation of higher rate hikes, longer rate hikes. Is the market going to need to price that in even further? In which that ends up particularly being our downfall. So a lot of things to kind of digest overnight off of all the statements that he said. And that's what I want to wait tomorrow morning to see how that reaction is going to be and what's going to be the sentiment overall. All right. And that'll likely be the telling story. So that's why you see I'm kind of giving you the both both best of both worlds basically, right? Give you the upside and the downside, both scenarios in which way things can happen right now. All right. But that kind of wraps up what I was mentioning, what I kind of want to touch on. Hopefully, kind of hoped you guys with a few of the names that you guys wanted to have me look at. But I'll wrap it up there. Keep it short and sweet. And then I'll see you guys on live tomorrow morning. But appreciate you guys joining in. Hopefully, kind of helps you guys out there. But other than that,